advances.
No, I definitely have
Good afternoon. We're going to get started. This particular session, we are focused on workforce issues, and you'll be hearing from our expert panelists about these various issues. We'll have time for you all to participate by posing questions to the panel. If you don't have any questions, then there'll be a quiz at the end of the session. I'm Vijay Gopu. I'm with the Louisiana Transportation Research Center. I serve as an associate director for external programs, and I've been with the center, been affiliated with the center for the past 20 years, and I've finished 48 years as a professor, and that's remarkable because I'm only 55 years old. So you see all the panel members. Before we get started, I want to give you a bit of information about the Transportation Research Center, because most of y'all might not have heard about it. So, whoops. Is this forward? Which one is? Start moving. You have to click it here? Okay. Thank you. Okay. This is the session we're talking about. Let me tell you about the Transportation Research Center in Louisiana. This is the Research and Technology Transfer and Education arm of Louisiana DOTD. And there are two components. One is research, another one is tech transfer and education, which deals with workforce development. And research, we have a lot of areas that are covered in the center. We do the research with in-house staff, and there's a lot of contract research that goes out to the universities. At any given time, we have about 50 to 60 active research projects. And the thing that we're not going to be talking about research, I'm talking about workforce development. There are several components which Louisiana LTRC deals with, and that is DOTD internal training. As you can see here, there's a lot of internal training that it has to deal with. And the way we deal with is we have a staff of about 100 people at the center, about 80 full-time people, and about 20 to 30 graduate students and student workers. And another component is the statewide strategic programs that's handled by LTRC. And another major component is external training. And that's, we have in the fiscal year 2024-25, the external program impacted about 8,500 individuals from the state agencies, from universities, and from the professional community. And also in the external training component, we also deal with the co-op program, which you're familiar with, and engineering rotational development program, ERDP, leadership development program, and another major component is the Louisiana Transportation Conference, which we get about 1,600 to 1,700 people who attend this. This is biennial, so the next conference would be in 2027. And another one is the tech transfer and publications and multimedia that is handled by LTRC. And we have a staff for that. And as you can see, there's a lot of activity in that particular area. And the last one, which LTRC manages, is the Local Technical Assistance Program. And just gives you, this picture tells you how many people are impacted and how many courses are offered. So you can see there's a lot of activity. And we are not really sleeping at the desk. There's a lot of work to do at LTRC. Now we're going to move on with the panel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to request the panel to respond to some questions that we have, that all of us would have. And I'll appreciate if the panel members kind of chime in and give us their opinion. The first question I have is, what workforce issue feels most urgent in your organization today. We have 4 DOTs represented here. That is recruitment, retention, training, succession, etc. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mark, can you respond to that? I'm going to ask our panelists to respond in a sequence.
Okay, so the major issues that we're facing at RDOT, Arkansas DOT, is typically, or right now, succession planning and retention. I talked to our HR folks about this recently, and we've got some senior officials in our department going to be retiring here in July. They're going to have 35, 40 plus years experience. That's a lot of experience just walking out the door, a lot of knowledge just walking out the door. So what we're looking at trying to do is try to improve retention. Of course, those folks retiring, we'll improve retention of folks that may be leaving, but also try to do some succession planning so those people can be replaced when they do leave, the ones that have been here for so long. So we feel like without improving retention, our succession efforts become reactive instead of being strategic. So we risk losing both seasoned expertise and the future leaders needed to sustain our DOT's mission. So what we're trying to do with that is we're including expanding leadership training, developing internal talent, increasing mentorship opportunities internally, and improving knowledge management practices to try to cover those gaps.
Mark, I'm sorry, I should have asked you to introduce yourself.
Introduce
Mark is
myself.
20 years younger than me, so he's only 35.
So I've been with RDOT since '91, so 34 plus years. I've worked in different areas within RDOT. We've got 3 different groups right now. We have our operations group, planning group, and administration. I've been fortunate enough to work in all 3 of those, just administration just being in the last year or so. So I've been anywhere from a field engineer and resident engineer's office to working with material specifications in our materials division, facilities management, dealing with some of our buildings like rest areas, but also our office spaces. And then also working in the construction division, working with some of our districts and being a liaison between them and our central office. And then being in one of our district offices here, not here, but in central Arkansas, the Little Rock area where I live, which is where our capital is. And I was the district construction engineer, district maintenance engineer, and the district engineer in that location. And then moving on to planning and system information and research. And then finally is our special projects coordinator right now.
I think I'm going to ask our panelists, I think I'm following the order here. James, please introduce yourself and
So sitting at the end didn't get me the last person picked. That's Also, I want to point out, I am in Norman, Oklahoma, right? Because I see all this color, and I thought maybe I made a wrong turn and ended up in College Station, Texas at A&M. But my friend Alex from ODOT assured me this is crimson, not maroon, so I guess we're safe. All right. I also noticed Oklahoma State, one of the things is the guns up, so I was thinking maybe I was close to Texas Tech, but I guess I don't know who took it first. I'm not going to take credit on that one, so I'm a UTEP guy. So James Stevenson, I'm the director of TIWFDS Maintenance Division. I've been with the department for a little over 27 years. I started in our El Paso district, so just to give orientation, we have 25 districts in Texas. Most of them are named after the largest city or town that they're in. So I worked in the El Paso district as a construction inspector. I also worked in the design section for a couple of years, and then I went to maintenance in 2005. So I've been in maintenance operations with TxDOT for the rest of that time. Worked in that district until 2016. In 2016, I moved to our Yoakum district, which is a coastal district between Houston and Corpus, and it violates the rule of largest city named after, because Victoria is actually the largest city in that district. But so I have to explain where Yoakum is, because most people are like, Yoakum, isn't that a country singer? So after that, I got a job as the deputy director of the maintenance division in Austin. I moved there in 2018, and I became the division director in 2020, right in the height of COVID and during the middle of a hurricane response. So good timing for me. So answering the question, you know, I think a lot of people will, with DOTs would be hating on me right now, because actually our biggest challenge in managing our workforce is headcount. Like a lot of DOTs, we're legislatively capped on how many people we can have working for the DOT, and we're at 99% plus hiring right And we are not allowed to go over without some severe ramifications with the legislature. So right now, we're almost, most people are at a hiring freeze because of economic issues. We're at a hiring freeze basically because we can't hire anybody externally at this time because we're just too close to the top of our head count. I just today sent an email to my boss because I have to get my chief engineer approval to hire an internal candidate, which means I'm not bringing somebody from the outside, I'm bringing somebody from within the department to my division, and I still have to get permission to do that. So that's a unique challenge to have. I think it's only happened twice in my 27 years. I think the last time was about 10 years ago, where we actually did go over our hiring cap and got in big trouble for that. So we put a bunch of controls in place. So it's a good problem to have. Biggest thing we're seeing is that the retirements have finally slowed down. That's something we didn't expect. We're funny enough, I'm retiring in May, but the retirements have really slowed down. The turnover in general has really slowed down. I attribute some of that to some of the economic things we're seeing in the country right now. That people don't have as many options, so they're holding on to the job security that they have at TxDOT. So it's a good problem to have that we're not having a lot of turnover and I think that I'll talk about later in some of the other questions, our strong recruiting and retention programs have actually helped us get to this point where we're in a problem, like I said, where we can't even hire because we're just pretty much full up. So I think it's a really good issue to have and very different than what we were facing 3 or 4 years ago, which is what I think still a lot of people are dealing with, which is trying to get people into the DOT and trying to keep them at the DOT. That has been a challenge for the last 3 or 4 years. That wasn't unique to ODOT or Arkansas or anybody. TxDOT was having the same issue, but that seems to have finally slowed down a little bit, at least for us.
Thank you, Gene. Oops. Bryce, I'm going to call on you to give us your views.
All right, my name is Bryce Hanlon. I work for ODOT. I'm from here, so I'm the one guy from here on the panel. But I actually, so I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma, right up the road, and I went to school here and got my undergrad, and I got my master's, I believe, in 2010. And kind of during that whole time, I was working at a design firm called EST. How I ended up in transportation is just random, but I went to Moore High School, and they just randomly had a scholarship that year that the scholarship included money, obviously, but then a summer internship. And they got me in there, and they put me on the side of a drill rig as a geotech logger, and fell in love with it. So it's just, just kind of random how it ended up that way, but I ended up, working for that company through school, which was great, not everyone really kind of had that experience going through school, and I think it really definitely set me up for success past school. So that's why, ODOT having their design squads and stuff like that is great. Having that during school experience really kind of set you up for success. But once I got out of school, I worked at EST for till 2023. So I worked my way through the geotech division all the way up to managing it, and then in 2023, basically ODOT was kind of struggling with just kind of what to do with geotech. They had these policies in place. Brian's here. Brian knows about it, but they had all these policies in place, and they didn't really have anybody on staff that could come in and kind of square things up and kind of be able to provide the perspective that the consultants have at ODOT. So I jumped on board, and really, I'm very different, obviously, than a lot of people at ODOT. Most people start at ODOT and leave. I'm one of the few that kind of was in consulting and went to ODOT. So I'll talk about it a lot later, but there's a lot of positives about being at ODOT versus a consultant. But since I've been there, I came from a company that was pretty notorious from hiring ODOT employees back in the day, so that's why whenever they got me, it was a big get, I remember. But that is the thing, ODOT, I think, does a good job of, getting young engineers in there. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about is engineers. That's kind of what I know. But they get these young engineers in there, they train them, they get them to where they're ready to go, and then they leave. As soon as they get that PE or they're about to get that PE, they leave. And so kind of developing, you know, other variables that you can really get these kids to hold on to and want to stay is the big step. And you know, it's hard. Your hands are kind of tied at a government agency. You just don't have the resources you have at these you know, design firms that can kind of just pick their number. And so you know, that's a big issue. And then, you know, succession. There was a big gap, I would say, in experience. So I think there was just a long, you know, there was a lot of people that were in senior level roles there, and kind of their natural successors ended up leaving at some point, probably in the last, you know, 10, 15 years. And so that kind of left a gap where, you know, you kind of have younger people in their, you know, late 30s, early 40s taking on these roles that maybe they weren't necessarily ready for. But, you know, ODOT's doing okay, you know, and they're doing well, but, you know, just kind of having, you know, those I think are issues that you're kind of always going to run into whenever you're at a DOT. But like I said, we are putting a lot of effort into, you know, highlighting, I would say, the positives that you get working at ODOT. So, you know, work-life balance, these type of things are things we're emphasizing, and we're seeing some younger people are starting to value that stuff more than a salary or that kind of stuff. So, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Oh, thank you, Bryce.
Yep.
I think I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to ask if the audience have any questions for the panel. You're most welcome to pose a question. Otherwise, I'm going to pose a question. Any questions? Okay. We'll move on. I think we have a lot of ground to cover. I'm going. Pardon? One more guy. Yeah. Garrett, you want to say anything?
I was waiting for the question.
You know, I'm sorry. Garrett and I are from LTRC, and I just.
You just want me to introduce? I can
Yeah,
introduce myself.
Yeah, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and.
So Dr. Gopu and I know each other very well. He wasn't being rude, I promise. I work at LTRC with him. I've been there about 12 years now. I started with the leadership program that y'all saw on the screen. I taught that for a few years and then took a new role doing a bunch of special projects. But ultimately, we're doing workforce development and technology transfer, seeing a lot of things that they're seeing. One reason, we were kind of like tag teaming questions, so we're not all answering the same question. But just to add a little bit to this, we're kind of dealing with the same stuff y'all are seeing here in Oklahoma. Pay is a big deal, and trying to get people to retain them once they're here, because they'll get their PE and then leave. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Garrett.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you the next question.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
What do you think are the barriers that keeping people from entering the transportation workforce?
So it's also kind of the same thing that's difficult to get people to stay. Ultimately, I hate to say pay, but pay is one of the biggest things, because even though engineers are starting to get paid more and more, the private industry is starting to catch up with benefits. And in Louisiana specifically, if you look at engineering as a whole, we're dealing with a lot of chemical engineering because there's a lot of chemical plants around Baton Rouge, and chemical engineers pay more than mechanical, which pays more than engineers or civil. And then in the civil world, the private industry is obviously going to pay more than the state. We're working on it, but a competitive pay structure is probably the biggest kickback that we're hearing about. The next thing would be a career progression. And it's not that we don't offer career progressions for engineers, because we have engineer 1s and 2s that come in with the co-op and the ERDP, and then they automatically jump to a 3 once they pass their PE. And then based on years of service, they'll go to a 4 and a 5, which all come with a pay increase in salary as well. The 6, 7s, and then 8s and 9s are more managerial and higher up in the positions that Mark was kind of talking about in Arkansas and in Texas. But what we're probably not doing a good job of is explaining that progression to them before they get hired on. And I think part of that too comes with one of the other issues we hear a lot, especially in our districts, is the delays that we have in hiring. If we have a job posting that comes up, it has to stay open for like a minimum of 2 weeks. And once it closes, sometimes it could take another 2 weeks before we start reaching out for interviews. And then once they complete the interviews, it could be another couple of weeks before we send a job offer. So by the time you look at it, we're sometimes 2 months out. And by that time, one of the students had talked to another company and took a job somewhere else. So that's an area we're working on, kind of trying to speed up. But it's tough. And y'all know how state is. Our hands are tied on certain things, so we can only speed it up so much, too.
Thank you, guy.
Thanks.
James, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so it's like somebody copied notes, but no. But actually from earlier, so I got some information from honestly from our Human Resources Division, because they're really good at tracking all the things going on with our workforce. And funny enough, it goes back to one of the I think it was one of the first panels that we had today, which is when they answered this question for me, and I agree with them, it's that this isn't a job that we market at the lowest levels. We're not talking about this in elementary schools and high schools. So remember when she asked the question, who thought they were gonna be in transportation when they were in school? I didn't raise my hand. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I did, that's what I was gonna do. Funny enough, I became a tanker in the Army, so I totally went a whole nother path. But yeah, we're not telling kids at a young age that this is a great, engaging job to have. We're not explaining to them the importance of what the transportation system does and being a part of designing, building, and maintaining it is. It's integral to every aspect of their life. They don't even think about it. How did you all get here? I flew here and then drove from Oklahoma City. Transportation. How did all that stuff get to the grocery store? Transportation. How does anybody get anywhere in this country or get anything in this country anywhere? It's all in the transportation system. And understanding that, selling the folks, and what I'm understanding from the younger generation is, luckily they're not quite as greedy as we were. They're about life fulfillment. And if we explain to them that you're gonna do something that's gonna be fulfilling in your life, and start selling it to them at a younger age, like I said, elementary school, junior highs, middle schools, I guess they call them now, and high schools, that's where we need to start selling this industry early on. And then once they understand the importance of what they could possibly be doing in this industry, the rest of it, I think, will take care of itself. So that I think is one of the biggest handicaps we have, is that transportation engineering or transportation in general is just not well understood in our lower education system. So.
Well, thank you, James. Bryce?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take it more like from an engineer, like to get an engineer to actually want to come work into the transportation world, they have all these options. So, obviously, you come to, so I came to OU not really knowing what engineering I wanted to be. Originally, I ended up getting that internship and ended up falling in love with something, which was kind of random. But there's a lot of people that show up here and have no idea what type of industry, what type of engineering industry they want to get into. And when you kind of look at some of the other options, I would say probably some of the more popular ones, at least here, because of there being a lot of oil field stuff, is a lot of, you get a lot of petroleum, a lot of mechanical, a lot of chemical engineers, and they can get out of school and start making six figures and not ever need to get a PE, never had to do that. They just get that engineer title and they're in their job. We're here, there's a 4-year wait, you gotta pass the test, most of the stuff you forgot in that 4 years, and you kind of, there is a whole process to it here. So it is just a more difficult, setup, I would say, for civils. So I think, naturally we're not making it easy on ourselves, but, like a lot of I would say some of the better geotech engineers that I went to school with, they got hired by like BP. They moved down to Houston, and they're still working there. They're doing great, but they would have been awesome, in our industry. But they kind of just took a way to kind of make money quicker and do that. So, like I said, I think just transportation it's the pay obviously is the thing, but just the overall getting into the industry, it takes a little bit more extra work than some of the other industries that engineers can get into.
Thank you, Bryce.
Yep.
Mark, you want to add?
I think echoing what other folks have said too, pay is always the big issue. As mentioned earlier, government agencies at every level, whether it's city, state, county, federal government, it's always going to pay less than private industry. So that's something we're battling with. I know for our agency, we've tried to help with that by doing surveys occasionally in the industry and seeing where the salary levels are, and then trying to boost our salaries up as much as we can, and still stay within what our legislature will allow us to do, or even asking them for more money to raise those salaries. So there's been increases from on the highway police side, because in Arkansas, law enforcement's kind of a big push here recently. I guess some of that's falling from the federal level also. So we have our own police agency within our agency, the highway police, that governs commercial vehicles, is inside RDOT. So we've raised their salaries, and we've also raised our engineering salaries to try to be a little more competitive with the private industry. But still, it's less. One of the things we try to explain to people that are looking at us, or try to put out there when we're trying to recruit for engineers, is it's not just about the pay. It is about some of the benefits that we have. And yes, some of the private companies are adding to some of their benefits, but being a state employee, especially in Arkansas, where you look down the road 30, 35 years towards retirement, we do have a somewhat publicly funded, but also your own salaries paying for a pension. It's not going to be a 401k. It's not going to be one that's going to be dependent on the stock market values. It's a pension that you have. You're not going to outlive your pension. It's what you're going to have from the time you retire to the time you die. And that's what some people at age 22, when they get out of college, are not really thinking about. But when they get to 50, 60 years old and getting ready to retire, they think, oh, maybe I should have done that. But it's a bit late at that point. So we're trying to explain that to them on the front end, along with the other benefits. There needs to be kind of a work-life balance that goes along with that. And that's usually easier to do when you're working for a government agency than you are working for a private company, where you're chasing the hours, chasing the billable hours, and the dollars that go along with that. The other thing to look at, too, is just the opportunities within civil engineering. We've talked about some other different branches of engineering, and they do pay more than civil typically. Or you can be geotech and work in a different field and get paid more than you would working for a civil company. However, there's still a lot of other things, even within civil engineering, within transportation, that you can do. A multitude of different things. Whether it's doing straight engineering, whether it's managing even some non-engineering areas where you need that expertise to manage those non-engineering areas within the DOT. So we need to make sure those opportunities, that's what we are doing now, making sure those opportunities are more aware to our applicants, to our students that are in college, or even then in high school and junior high level, to let them know what kind of things they can still do and still be considered to be a civil engineer.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Any questions from the audience? No? You better be prepared for the quiz.
Can I make not a question, but a comment?
Comment.
It goes along with what we've been talking about. Anthony, Oklahoma DOT. I concur with a lot of what you guys have said. I have had the pleasure of, over the last 2 years, I have probably hired 30 full-time engineers and probably 20 students here to our campuses. And in each of those interviews and conversations, we never once talked about salary. I'm seeing a lot of people coming out of private industry into transportation, particularly public sector, because they're wanting the training. They're walking away from good salaries because they want an opportunity to just learn the job. I think in civils, I think all of us have that public servant heart, and we just want to do a good job. And they want an opportunity to learn and get really proficient, really skilled at what it is I'm going to do before I go out and hit the private sector. And so I would say that in itself, the opportunity to get into a position, learn it, get really, really good at it, and then go chase the higher dollars is something maybe we need to talk more about.
Thank you. I got another question for the panel. What are the top reasons for employees to stay or leave state transportation agencies? I'm going to ask Bryce, can you start off?
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the people that stay. So obviously I came from the consulting world into ODOT. Whenever I get there, you see the people that have been there a long time, and I think the people that stay really feel like a purpose every day when they show up to work, and they feel like they're making a difference. Because I think that's kind of what you got to hang your hat on. Is like you're working for this agency, and kind of a lot of your decisions are going to really affect how the entire program works on a day-to-day basis. That's a cool feeling. So, you know, like even for me, like whenever I there, that's kind of what I kind of hang my hat on is like, you know, every day you show up to work and you can be making a decision that's going to greatly affect how processes are done or how, you know, projects are designed or built for the next couple decades. So that's the type of stuff I think you really got to get excited about your purpose and why you show up to work because, yeah, there are other things that are lacking, but you can really, it's like a direct path to making some of the biggest decisions in the state when it comes to design projects. There are people leave that, you know, kind of, I've been there 3 years, and there's a lot of engineers that have left, and from what I heard, you know, a lot of them were complaining about just, you know, being upset about kind of not having as much work as they'd like to have, and you know, ODOT was kind of put in a tough spot where, you know, they obviously have so much work, there's so many projects, and they can't do everything in-house, so, you know, you have to sub a lot of this work out to consultants, and you know, some engineers, I feel like, instead of just like being like, hey, I'm gonna be better, I'm gonna do more, they just start kind of wallowing in their own self-pity and being like, you know, why me? Why, you know, is this happening to me? And then they end up leaving because they're just like, well, ODOT's not taking care of me or whatever. So, but I think really working for these agencies, I mean, you can really make the job whatever you want. I mean, you kind of can get whatever you put into it. You know, like I said, well, I'm just in the geotech world, but you know, with my role, you know, I'm trying to change a lot of like how geotech practice is done in the state, you know, change how we invoice stuff, change, you know, our processes that we follow, try to modernize things. You know, there's things you can do working at these agencies that you just can't do at a consultant. So that's the type of stuff you got to get fired up about and get you to show up every day. So.
Thank you, Bryce.
Yep.
Garrett, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, thank you. So to your point, in the past, we've seen pay kind of like one of the major reasons people leave and stay, actually. It's not quite to that extent like it used to be. The years I've been here, I've heard and seen tons, because I get to interact with a bunch of managers and engineers at all the different levels. But I kind of cheated for coming to the conference. I reached out to our coworker who's in charge of our co-op program, and she does a post-exit survey to all of the students like 6 months after they graduate, asking if they stayed at DOTD, why did they choose to stay, and if they left, why did they choose to leave? So I do have some of their answers I did want to share. Spoiler, on both ends of the spectrum, they did mention pay. It's not one of the highest ones. One of the biggest things that's mentioned for both was the flexibility. Because on one hand, when they stay, they have the flexibility to kind of work on different things, do different types of work like Bryce was talking about, but they lose out on flexibility like telework, because our state took away state telework a few years ago. And the timing of your work hours isn't as flexible as it could be potentially in the private industry. My dad calls it banker's hours, right? It's 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. I work like 6:30 to 4, but we can't work 4/10s. We can't work like 7 on, 7 off. So depending on the industry, the hours and flexibility there can kind of be an issue. A lot of people do stay because of the work-life balance and the retirement. They're coming around to see the retirement a lot. I think one day I was trying to count, like an informal count. We have more than 20 people in our department who are either husband and wife or brothers or sisters. And then we have over probably 100 like parents and kids. Like, it's a huge family thing. So hearing the kids talk earlier about family-oriented in Oklahoma, that's kind of a relief, because it makes us know that that's true in Louisiana too. Some of the things, other reasons that they said they stayed, just the relationship with the coworkers, the opportunity of the type of work they're doing, including being out in the field. I mentioned work-life balance, but also like the amount of work. And then one of the quotes was, "I enjoy working where the purpose is not profit-driven, it's more of a quality product." So that was pretty good to know that as young as they are, they're actually seeing this. And it's not something we're just telling ourselves, so that's good. I kind of mentioned a few of the leave. And then one of the other reasons people mention they leave, we're undergoing a big org structure, like a reorganization from the state right now. And a lot of people kind of mention like just lack of communication, lack of transparency, and just uncertainty moving forward, not knowing what's going to happen. So when the joke I tell, kids today in general, like they have no qualms about getting on their phone, on social media, and sending a direct message to anybody and asking anything. So when they come into an organization, they want to be able to email or they won't pick up the phone and call, that's probably bad. But they want to text or email like anybody without having to go through the structure that we're familiar with, like that command and control style. And that's not always easily done in a state agency. So I think that kind of sometimes can cap them in where they think they might can go. So y'all are seeing that too? I see some bit, okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
Mark?
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. A lot's been said about it already, but I will say as far as the being in contact with people within the agency or being able to reach out to people, we kind of allow that to some degree, but it's really more trying to get information out more than anything else. One of the things we've seen at different levels and different age groups, not just the younger folks that are coming in, is a lack of transparency where we're just not sure why something's being done the way it's being done. With our current director, who's relatively young, I think he's probably in his early 40s, probably the youngest director we've had in a while, he's bringing a lot of new thoughts, I guess, or the way of doing things into the department. You know, he's been here that whole time, so the last 20 plus years. And that leadership level is bringing more things into it. And one of those is giving out more information. He hired somebody as an internal coordinator. We never had that before, to try to make sure we get information out to our employees. We have a meeting typically every Monday morning with the executive level and a few others that I'm privileged, I guess, to attend that meeting since I'm not really executive level. But there's a roundup email that's sent out to all employees that kind of summarizes some of the things that were discussed at that meeting. He also does a video like every couple of weeks that goes out to everybody in the department on Vimeo, I guess it's called. That's emailed out, or links emailed out, where he explains what's coming up, what's been going on, any major changes. He tries to relay that to all the employees coming directly from him by video, not down through the chain. So that way it's more transparent of what's going on. So I think that's helped a whole lot to try to reach out to the different cultures that we have within inside the department. I think it's also helped with retention too.
Thank you, Mark. James?
So yeah, I mean, the biggest, like I said, I did mention it earlier, slow down, but still right now our biggest loss is retirements, which is good because that means people are staying through the end to the end of their career. That means the retention was good because they stayed to retire. And that is one of the biggest selling points that we have is our retirement system, very similar to what Mark talked about. It's a pension plan, which is, I think you have to do a good job of explaining the difference between that and like a 401k, because most kids don't understand that, especially when they're 20 and you're talking about, oh yeah, 40 years from now you're gonna get this great benefit. 40 years, that's forever. You know, so outside of the retirements, our biggest turnover and loss is in the first 2 years, and it's mainly with our maintenance operations staff. It's not necessarily engineers, but I'm talking more of a global view for the DOT. And it's, you know, I think the biggest thing is they get in and this isn't for me. But what we've done, and I've worked extensively with our HR folks because it is in maintenance operations that we're seeing this, is that we got to sell these things and made it quantitative for them. Some of these benefits, you know, like TechSite employees don't pay for themselves, they don't pay a penny for insurance. Insurance is provided free to the actual employee. Now, if they have a family member, they have to pay for it, but the insurance for the family member or for the employee is free. So we do a cost, we come up with cost summaries for them to say, okay, you can go to this private sector job, which probably won't provide you insurance, and this is the monetary benefit you're gonna lose. So you'll get a bigger paycheck, but you're actually getting a smaller paycheck because you're getting all this money taken away from you to pay for insurance and these other things that we provide either for free or very, very low prices, like all the other types of insurance, like dental, vision, all that stuff. So, and then showing the quantitative amount of what you get in retirement if you stick with us and stay with the department that long. You know, we've got Folks have analyzed the difference between if you stayed the same amount, had a 401k versus doing a retirement pension, and the payout differences, if you've ever seen that, it's pretty large. So once we get them in, and we got them too, and then I think there's even what I call a 5-year threshold. Once you get into that 5-year threshold, our turnover rate gets really, really low. It just drops off. So if you can get them in the door, explain to them why it's a benefit, and then what you discussed earlier about we're getting people in there that have a public service heart anyway. I don't think TxDOT or any other DOT is advertising itself as you're gonna get the biggest paycheck here. It's gonna be, you're gonna do something meaningful here. So selling them on our culture, stability, and flexibility. You talked about flexibility, freedom to do things with your family. Like, you're not questioned. It's kind of a culture thing with our agency. If you ask for time off, unless you're in the middle of an emergency, we're gonna give you time off. If you have a health issue with a family member, I've had to deal with this many times as a supervisor. You don't need to explain to me, just go do what you need to. The job will be here when you come back. That's something I think we highly undersell as a DOT, that freedom when you need it to do things, whether it's quality of life or just a family emergency or whatever it may be, that you have the freedom to do that and not have to worry about losing your job because of it. That's again, another point that we've really, really been selling hard in the last few years. So that's how we're keeping people staying and cutting down on the people leaving our agency.
Thank you, James. In the time we have, I have one last question to the panel, and then I'll open the floor for others to ask questions. My last question is, where are you seeing the hardest to fill roles right now in your agency, Bryce?
Okay, so I had to ask about this one. I manage 2 people, so they're both filled, so I got that going. So I obviously have, with my geotech background, we have a materials division, geotech branch that they have a hard time filling a lot of the field roles. Geotech, you need these guys to go out and drill the borings and stuff for you, and that role was kind of a rotating cast of characters over there. And so just kind of field people, people that are qualified, like you typically would need a CDL, you would typically need to have some sort of experience. The most recent guy they had, he quit a couple months ago, and so they had to hire some young guys, kind of in their early 20s that have no CDL, no drilling experience, but they will show up to work. And so they're gonna send them to a drilling school, teach them to drill, gonna send them to a CDL school, get them their CDL, and they kind of got to do it that way, because you can't just find the qualified people, because they can obviously make more money in the private sector. On the engineering side, I asked Lauren, who is a roadway design engineer, and she said the roles she's having the hardest time filling, they got a lot of like lower level engineers, and they got CADs, but it's kind of that engineering manager role. It's the people that are, not at her level, but like right below that, the people that they need to kind of be the leaders, like in the separate districts. They've had a lot of those leave the last year or so, and they really don't have people on staff that are qualified to fill those type of roles. So it's kind of like it is kind of the domino effect where, these people that are having to be in the more senior positions a little bit early are getting there. Well, the roles that those people should have been in are trying to be filled by somebody even younger than them, and they're not necessarily qualified for that too. So, yeah, those are kind of the main roles that we're seeing issues right now. So,
Thank you, Bryce.
yep.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing with engineers. They're moving up really quick. And then the higher level engineer positions typically don't stay open long because people are filling them, because those are the ones who are already in line to retire with the state anyway. So they'll go and take an engineer 8 or 9 position for 3 to 5 years, get their high pay for that, and then retire and leave. So the higher positions are getting a lot of turnover, but it's happening, I say quick, but the lower level engineers are getting difficult to fill. They haven't been in the past, but since they're kind of turning over, they're starting to have trouble filling that. And then also on the engineering side, we're seeing our middle engineers, like I said, we call them an engineer 3, 4, or 5. I don't know if that's the same kind of numbers y'all use, but they're moving from doing like all design work to a lot of project management work and just a little bit of design. So they're not doing what they were, quote, originally hired to do. And they're leaving because they're tired of that and they want to go do design work somewhere. Or the ones that really like the project management are the ones that are moving up. So they're actually considering opening a position up just for, quote, project managers, to where you don't have to have your PE to do project management type work. So that's something that they're kind of flirting with to help fill those gaps. That's on the engineering side. On the operations side, just like y'all in Texas, MEOs are constant turnover. I think the term or the number they gave me was like 50% is turning over every couple of years. And then right now, construction inspectors. The number I got last week, we have 400 construction inspectors across the state, and 250 of those are open right now. So we need construction inspectors bad. That's kind of the big areas in our state.
Thank you, Gary.
We're seeing some of those same issues too. For the construction inspection side, the non-engineering roles are maybe not quite so hard to fill. The engineering positions are still hard to fill, especially in remote areas. So, I mean, working in the state, it's already a rural state. We've got even more rural parts of that state. So trying to get engineers that are willing to go work in those areas and live in those areas is even harder to do. And people that are from those areas don't want to be engineers. They're in the farming industry and other types of things. So trying to get someone who grew up in a larger city to move to a smaller city, you can't always pay them enough to even do that. So a lot of our remote areas are getting extremely hard to fill. We have the resident engineer who would know to be in charge of those offices. We've got several in South Arkansas right now that have been unfilled for several years, and even their assistant is also unfilled. So the person in the district office is having to step down to some degree, or reach down, so to speak, and manage that office, or have a non-engineer manage an engineering office because that's who's there. One of the things we've tried to do to fill some of those engineering positions in the field in the rural areas is to actually create a position that's a non-engineering position, but it's for somebody who's got the experience to be able to lead and do some of those things in that office. So they call it a construction management position, or construction managers, which we didn't have that title before in the field, but now we do, to try to close that gap a little bit. One of the things we're also doing, as I've done recently in the last 5 to 7 years, most recent one was just a couple weeks ago, is our central office. We're a little more centralized than TXDOT is, I understand. So all of our design, planning is all done in the central office as opposed from the districts. But a lot of folks don't want to move to Little Rock, whether they're engineering positions or non-engineering positions. So we have created an office in Northwest Arkansas where our main University of Arkansas campus is, where people that want to do central office type design work or planning work can stay in that general area and work out of that office instead of coming to Little Rock. And we just recently, just last week, we had a ribbon cutting on an office in Northeast Arkansas, where Arkansas State University is based in the same city. It's also where our director and one of our chief engineers is now graduated from. They're kind of taken over from the University of Arkansas at RDOT. But we'd open up an office there where they can do the same thing there, have design squads, groups working out of that office instead of having to work out of Little Rock. So that's helped us retain some people that would have left if they had to stay in Little Rock, and also attract the people that didn't want to come to Little Rock so they can work in those offices. So that's made that a lot easier. And the presentation that was made earlier about what y'all are doing here in Oklahoma with the design groups, I talked to some of the guys here about that after that presentation. I sent a text to our director, letting him know what was being discussed, and he actually said he was already aware of that and is planning on doing something similar out of those 2 satellite offices that we have.
Thank you. James?
So I keep looking back to see if my notes got hacked and got put up here, because they all said the same thing I was going to say. So, yeah, it's mid-level engineers. We're doing great hiring young engineers, engineer assistants, and the lower level of the engineers. And we're actually recruiting in a lot of folks who worked for TXDOT previously that went consultant or just coming in from the outside, what I call senior level engineers coming in for an opportunity with the department. But it's those mid-level engineers. And actually, this was kind of foreseen. I took a class about 10 years ago on leadership, and they talked about the generational thing. And the baby boomers, huge generation. Generation Y and Z, big generations. Generation X, small. So what you're seeing is the last of mine, I'm a Generation X, the last of us are going out the door, and there was not that traditional gap filling in by equal-sized generations. So we were really small, so there wasn't enough of us to fill. And we're doing things now in Texas that I'd never thought I'd see. I just literally saw somebody get an area engineer job that's managing several counties in the state of Texas, all maintenance and construction activities and some design, and this person's had a PE license for 2 years. What that creates is, yeah, it's an opportunity you can sell. You can come here and get into these more senior positions at a very young age, but what they don't explain to those younger folks is that's gonna be a very high-pressure situation for a long time. And with no real education or background, and nothing, no education replaces wisdom. We all know that, right? So they're getting put in these positions without the traditional growing of their knowledge base before they get there. And that's gonna cause an even bigger strain on the system. It's gonna cause a higher burnout rate, is my prediction. And that's gonna just keep exacerbating this challenge of they run off to do something simpler because they don't want the high-pressure job anymore, and then somebody else is gonna, in the same boat, is gonna get landed in that job. So it right now is, to me, one of the biggest challenges we're facing. It's great that we're fully capacity, but we're never gonna fill in that middle gap if we don't kind of do a more traditional growing of our staff. So it's gonna put a lot of pressure on people looking for solutions through AI, which we're already doing. Since they don't know, maybe we can create the knowledge for them. And things like that. Of course, I see major challenges with that too. So, but again, I think I see it as people being put in roles that traditionally, with little experience that they've never had before. So it's gonna be an ongoing challenge for all DOTs across the nation.
I want to thank the panel for their outstanding answers, and I appreciate your patience and participation in this session. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause, please. Thank you.